Hello, welcome to this week's coffee tasting. It's Bikila Ibsa, our first washed coffee of the season from Ethiopia. And it's a country that I'm really excited to roast. It's one where you get some really interesting flavor profiles, and as a roaster can be quite difficult to do and to execute the roast well. So something that really tries to keep me on my toes as a roaster of this coffee. So what I've done, as usual, is I've set up a cupping table, as we call it, and this is an analytical way of being able to assess different batches or different styles of raw coffee that we'd receive from importers. In this case, I'm analysing two batches that I have done for our subscribers this week. So 2 different roasts on the table. The first roast was always going to be a foray into what the coffee may do inside in the roasting environment. This roasted really well. I made some adjustments on our second batch. And let's see if there's an improvement batch by batch. So what I'm going to do is I have pre-weighed the coffee beans today, but I'm going to just grind the coffee, then I'll do the application of water and go through the tasting as per usual. Now that I've ground the coffee, the next process is to assess the dry aromatics. So what we do here is we just slightly agitate the cups. Some people argue that you shouldn't do that. I like to do it. It's just something I've done for 15 years, so I'm going to really struggle in trying to break that habit. So quickly agitate the cup and then just dig your nose in, see if you can smell anything that would help communicate those aromas to your customers. So on the nose, you can smell some fruits. There's maybe a little bit of chocolate in there. I actually only roasted these coffees yesterday, and usually I would like to spend probably 3 to 5 days of resting post-roast before I do a proper assessment of the coffees. Water, I take it to boiling point. By the time I've poured the water onto each of the cups, it's going to be cooled down to probably somewhere between 90 and 95 degrees Celsius. As we're getting through into the autumn phase of this year in the UK, it's getting cooler. That heat dissipation rate is going to be much quicker during these periods of time. So I always take the coffee. I always take the water to boiling point. So let's apply some water. We have set a timer. We like to have 4 minutes of contact time. This then again is another standardization across the brewing to make sure that each glass has the same contact time, the same brewing time, removing one of the variables so that when I'm tasting and assessing the contents of the cups, I can be sure that the flavor differences are to do with the roast profile rather than the method in which I've brewed it. So we'll just wait for 4 minutes now, and then we'll break and get into the rest of the cupping. Okay, so 4 minutes have now passed. The next stage is to assess the wet aroma of the coffee, and we do this by breaking the crust. That involves me using a spoon. I'm very particular with my spoons. I like to use these 2 small stainless steel ones and cup with this black one. I'll come on to that a little bit later. Anyway, use my spoon to break the crust, dig my nose in, see what aromas come forward. Washing my spoon in between each cup to make sure, again, I have standardization and I'm not cross-contaminating, but let's get into it. Some of those aromas are released into my nose as I'm doing it. I like to smell the back of the spoon just to make sure that there's these like oil captures that are on top. It's a real nice release into your nose. Good similarity between the two. I'd maybe say that there was a little more sort of sweetness perceived on this cup here. This cup was one that, or this roast should I say, was a roast that I applied a slightly different temperature profile as we came into first crack. I was mindful as well to increase development time a little bit. The risk with overdeveloping a high altitude Ethiopian coffee, washed Ethiopian coffee, is such that you'll lose some of those poppy fruit notes that you can get. But again, it needs to be balanced. I want there to be good sweetness because these coffees are going to be brewed in a multitude of ways. I like to omni roast, so this could go through espresso, it may be a filter, maybe batch, etc., etc. So I like to get some of that sweetness through into the cup, but both smelling really great, some sweet characteristics and some maybe like purple fruits, that type of thing. So I'm going to now remove the scum from the top, so that the rest of the cups are available to taste. So I'll just get on with that briefly. Again, I am just washing the spoons in between, making a mess as you go. But that's life as a cupper, really. Should really wear an apron. There's a reason why I wear black all the time, and that tends to be because I've got spit down my front. Right, so that's that done. I'm now going to wait for these to cool. In this temperature, what are we? Maybe 18 degrees ambient temperature. I like to give 11 minutes between first contact and the point at which I make my first flavour assessment. I don't want to burn my palate. One, because it will ruin the cupping. Two, it's not very pleasant when you burn your tongue. So we're sort of 7-8 minutes in now. I'll let these cool and come back to the actual tasting. Okay, so now the best bit. We're 11 minutes into the contact time that the water has had with the coffee, and it's the bit that we as cuppers all enjoy, getting stuck into the coffee. So I'm going to be using this this spoon today. Interesting spoon, nice deep bowl. I like that. Lovely, I don't know whether you can see this correctly, lovely angle of bowl to spoon. Nice to be able to hold that. Beautiful piece of work, this. It is made by Hario, Japanese company. The fact that it's a darker color as well is really useful. It removes one of the sensory inputs. So whereas with my stainless steel spoon, you'd be able to see the liquor color in the bowl. With this, you won't be able to see much of the liquor color because there's a dark coloration underneath. So it removes one of those sensory inputs, so that the flavor assessment is going to be more about the flavor and less about the perception of color and how that's going to interpret onto your palate. So Hario spoons, these are lovely. Let's get into the tasting. So in both cups, there's a pretty prominent kind of blackberry characteristic, maybe some black currant, purple fruits, little tiny purple fruits, you know, those intense type. Yeah. Blackberries, definitely blackberries. So you'll see on our bags that there are usually 3 flavor descriptors. Call those front, middle, and back, or front, middle, and end. So the blackberry would be that descriptor of that sort of fruit complex, the first thing that spikes on your tongue as you take a sip of the brew. Next would be my descriptor of the mid section, and of that, I'm thinking with this like soft orange fleshy fruit. Sweet, soft, orange, fleshy fruit. Peachy, nectarine, that type of thing. Maybe not overripe peach or nectarine, and maybe that's what I would try and do on the next iterations of the roast, is maybe elongate the roast a touch. I could even think of applying a bit more heat earlier on in the roast, and stretching out what we call the Maillard zone, so that's post 160 degrees Celsius until first crack. That might help increasing that perceived sweetness. The finish. The finish is texturally almost sticky. Almost. Not quite, but almost. let's call it sort of like a nougat type of thing. So touch of caramel, some sweet fruit, that type of thing. On this cup here, I've also got a smidge of like a chocolatey type finish, and I think that's to do with the development time. It's not quite so prevalent in the first roast. This one is more bright, more crisp, more precise, and I don't want to say edgy. That's maybe too strong a word, but there are definite divisions in the flavour. Cup 2 and that extra 5 seconds of roasting has seemed to harmonise things a little more. But what we then get is that a slightly more chocolatey finish, which is a thing that you get in Ethiopian coffee. Both of them really, really beautiful. So, how about brewing? I would probably, with many washed Ethiopian coffees, I would have a strong leaning towards filter or full immersion brew. Why? They're highly complex coffees, and that complexity really opens up when you have a brew method that lends itself to dilution. So with a cafetiere, you might be brewing with a litre of water. That gives room to open up. Definitely filter brewing. The filter papers and the way the filter papers will hold back some of the fine particles in suspension will remove the cloudiness, remove the body inside of the cup, and that will allow that clarity to open up. So if I had a preferred method of brewing this, I would say a filter brew, something like a Hario drip brew if you're at home, or commercially you could use a big batch brew. There's a couple of cafes that we work with in Hull that do lovely batch brews, and I may suggest this for them. For espresso, totally, like it would work as espresso, but expect that bright purple fruit first and foremost. Would I pair it with milk? Yeah, definitely. You'll get some of those nougat and like chocolate characteristics that come through. So I think we've got a washed Ethiopian coffee here that's going to be incredibly versatile. Something that I'm excited to release to people. I'm excited to continue through the rest of the sack of coffee to see what else I can get from the roast profile. I think as a roaster, I will be able to get a better harmony. What I'll likely do is I will likely take this roast method, but apply it to this roast time. So I'll reduce the overall time of the profile from 10 minutes 50 down to 10 minutes 45, but I'll take the post first crack development time to something similar to this, which was about 1 minute and 50 seconds. I do that because I use a certain gas entry into first crack. These are topics that I'll discuss a little later in time, but on the table today, two really beautiful iterations of a washed coffee from Ethiopia. I'm excited to release this to everybody, and I really do hope you enjoy it.